Thanks to everyone else for joining us today for this discussion of integrated identity solutions. As Steve mentioned, my name is Adam Tiffany. I'm a pre-sales architect here at ISSQUARED. Traditionally, I tackle challenges in identity and certificate management. I have a deep experience with enterprise IT organizations, specializing in cybersecurity and digital transformation. I do very much enjoy bringing innovative solutions to market. And today with ISSQUARED, that's the idea of strengthening identity governance, deploying hyperconverged infrastructures, and lifecycle management, which we'll talk about today. So thanks so much for coming. As we go throughout our agenda here, we'll start with a shift in the security paradigm and what that looks like and how zero trust ideology has been built into that. We'll talk about the problem with identity silos and the solution of integrated identity and what that looks like, the components, the benefits, the challenges. We'll talk a little bit about roadmap, and we'll end with some Q&A. If you do have questions, feel free to toss those out into the chat. We want to make this very conversational, but again, we will make time at the end, so please let us know. So let's get started. Now, the shift in security paradigm, this really is not a new concept, but it's the idea that data can no longer be confined to these four walls. And over time, the idea of security has shifted from those four walls to the computing cabinet, to the end device, but now identity is the de facto boundary. And this has come from the rise of remote work and cloud computing, driving the need for this trust-based access gating. Now, zero trust shouldn't be new either, but it's this principle of never trust, always verify. Every action should be authorized and authenticated. Zero trust leans on the idea of micro network segmentation and least privilege access, never allowing access where it is not needed. We have a reliance on continuous identity verification such that the user using the identity is as we expect. And identity is the new perimeter. We see this as access decisions being very identity-centric, or they increasingly should be. Because users access data through a multitude of devices, security and automation need to stem from this user behavior. The idea of profiles, contextual signals, multi-factor authentication, device posture, all benefit from this idea of lifecycle automation. And identity as a control plane is a strong factor as well. We want to be able to predict where the user is. And the reality is we cannot do that. So we want to be able to extend our identity infrastructure to support the user where they're accessing the data. Now, we have this idea of silos in identity services, where a siloed approach has helped introduce key concepts to the market, concepts like directory services, access management, identity lifecycle management, privileged access management, and governance and compliance. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means going forward. Now, silos, they've built up for a reason, but they've become problematic. And you'll see this as a duplication of effort, where managing multiple products becomes very time-consuming for administrators. And you end up with inconsistent policies and blind spots and manual reconciliation for these user identities over the applications. This results in a poor user experience many times and resistance from the user base, where a multitude of solutions leads to a multiple sessions and data destinations. And this multiplies your security risks and expands your attack surface, which is the direction we would rather not go. Now, the forces driving integration, a lot of times this is cloud transformation, we have SaaS adoption, we have hybrid and remote work acceleration. And the truth is workers connect outside of the office more and more. We want to be able to support them wherever they are when they're outside of those four walls. We do have a lot of regulatory expansion as well, where historically Sarbanes-Oxley and HIPAA were helping drive security decisions, and now GDPR and really helped drive that as well and keep people on the straight and narrow. And it's these security requirements force the rethinking of legacy solutions. M&A for acquisitions and mergers, digital transformation initiatives kind of result in this core computing system alteration, which can yield massive headaches and opportunities for change. And we want to view these as opportunities such that we can benefit from the change as opposed to being held back. Now, what is an integrated identity framework? We see this as the control plane across all identity disciplines. Think of this as a single pane of glass. again, we're talking about user frustration, and it's that single pane of glass that's going to limit user frustration and yield productivity for our workforce. We have unified policies, shared data models, automation, making it easier to yield more reliable results. We see the idea of implement zero trust identity principles. We want to do this consistently so we have less chance of policies falling through the cracks. And when we have an increase in end-to-end visibility and governance, where unified visibility across all identities, entitlements, and activities yield to better visibility and better decisions made going forward. Now, we want to realize this vision of identity as infrastructure, and that kind of means a couple different things. We have contextual authentication and decentralized enforcement, both very critical to end user behavior, where we need to be continuously monitoring and accounted for. We have unified identity fabric connected across services. I guess this features like single sign-on thrive in this integrated environment that overlay this identity fabric across these critical applications. We want to make sure that's available to them when they need it. We have real-time identity validation and posture monitoring. Again, back to this zero trust idea of never trust and always verify. We have the idea of continuous identity entitlement validation, where identity milestones are automatically validated against defined roles and compliance policies, removing stale and risky entitlements instantly, leaning on that automation. And the idea of privileged access on an on-demand service, maybe through the idea of self-service, where high-risk entitlements are granted only when needed, which is a very important concept to keep our administrators available to the data that they need, but keep the idea of breached identities to a minimum. Now, as we talk about the components of an identity framework, we're looking at the directory services and federation, where we have overarching authentication and authorization for our users. The identity lifecycle brings in the idea of joiners, movers, and leavers, where the automation of predictable lifecycle milestones can yield the ability to focus on automation to make those changes quick and predictable. Privileged and just-in-time access, yield in policing all access, especially those with advanced privileges. They may be our most trusted users, but they're our most risky accounts, and we want to make sure that those are accounted for such that they don't fall into the wrong hands. We have the idea of governance, risk, and compliance, where real-time assurance of identity posture yields not only benefits for us as the administrators that are imposing the security on our environment, but also the regulatory commissions who need verification of these services being in place. Analytics and intelligence yield better understanding of what is being used by who and when, such that we can go back and review that historically as needed. Now, we'll go into these just a bit deeper here. The idea of directory and federation started with something like Active Directory, where identity validation needs to be readily available. And as services have extended, you end up with the idea of federation between apps and single sign-on, where centralized authentication enables advanced access following successful authentication. We have user and device policy enforcement, where reliable reconciliation of identity posture across the East-West fabric yields a more reliable infrastructure, such that we do not want gaps in this security policy. We want the same level of access to our users wherever they're logging in. Lifecycle management is a very important part of integrated identity, where automated provisioning and deprovisioning allow us to build reliable workflows and not individual configurations, which again is very time consuming and can be very problematic for making mistakes that we don't expect. We have the idea of approvals, delegation, and self-service. This is important for both internal and external users, which should be enabled to request their own access based on preconceived access expectations. So work we do up front should yield results for our users in the field. We mentioned the JML workflows, and this is really important for onboarding and offboarding, which should be very quick and reliable. If you were to have a disgruntled employee, for example, you want to limit their exposure extremely quickly, and you can do that through these automated workflows. So let's pick up where we started, where we're talking about what is an integrated identity framework. We have one control plane across all identity disciplines, yielding a single pane of glass, which does yield a better user experience without having to log into these separate organizations, these different applications. We have unified policies, shared data models, and automation yielding easier integration for more reliable results. We have this idea of implementing zero trust identity principles consistently, and the consistency is the important, yielding less chance of policies falling through the cracks. We have end-to-end visibility and governance in an integrated identity framework where unified visibility across all identities, entitlements, and activities can yield better results for our users in the field. Now, what we're really looking for is this vision of identity as infrastructure, where we have contextual authentication and decentralized enforcement, where end user behavior needs to be continuously monitored and accounted for, such that we can check for anomalies and then have automations built off of those anomalies. We have a unified identity fabric connected across services. Features like single sign-on, they thrive in this integrated environment such that an overlay identity fabric over all critical applications can yield time savings and authentication savings as well for those end users. We have real-time identity validation and posture monitoring. This idea of zero trust, never trust, always verify, very important to identity as infrastructure. We have the idea of continuous identity entitlement validation, where identity milestones are automatically validated against role definitions and compliance policies, removing those stale or risky entitlements instantly through those automations. We have privileged access as an on-demand service, where high-risk entitlements are granted only when needed. Very important for limiting access to applications, but still providing access when needed. Now, the idea of identity framework has a multitude of components. Here we see on the screen the idea of directory and federation, where overarching authentication and authorization yield access to applications when out in the field. The identity lifecycle joiner, mover, leaver workflows, where we automate the predictable lifecycle milestones of these users. We have privileged just-in-time access, where policing all access, especially those with privileged access and privileged policies, is very critical to allowing them to do their job as administrators, but making sure that the access isn't always open and available. We have the idea of governance, risk, and compliance, where real-time assurance of identity posture is very important, especially to these regulatory bodies, as we mentioned previously. Analytics and intelligence is built in, where better understanding of who is accessing what and when can be historically reviewed for our own benefit and making more intelligent decisions in the future. Now, we'll go into these just a bit more, and as we talk about directory and federation, what we're really referring to is this built up of what for a lot of us was Active Directory, where identity validation needs to be reliably available. And as this is scaled out beyond the four walls, we introduce the likes of federation and single sign-on between these apps, where centralized authentication enables advanced access following successful authentication. We have user and device policy enforcement, where reliable reconciliation of identity posture across an east-west fabric results in a very reliable environment. We don't want an inconsistency of access through this fabric, and we want to make sure that it's reliable, which yields good security. Lifecycle management is a very critical portion of identity management, and where we're introducing these automated provisioning and deprovisioning milestones. We're building in reliable workflows and not individual configurations, and this ends up being very important as we think of the overhead associated with making these configurations and the chance for problems and errors in making these configurations. So building in automation ends up yielding a lot of productivity gains. The idea of approvals and delegation and self-service is really important to these internal and external users, enabling them to request their own access based on preconceived access expectations. We mentioned the joiner, mover, leaver workflows, where onboarding and offboarding should be quick and reliable. These can be pre-configured, and in the event that we have a malicious employee, for example, we can sever that identity, sever that access at a moment's notice. We want to do it predictably. We want to do it quick. We have the idea of privileged identity management, and this is important where privileged users can be perceived as trustworthy and their access rights are incredibly critical. We may trust the user as an administrator, but that actual identity is very critical to the organization. And should it become breached, it could become very problematic to the organization. We mentioned the idea of just-in-time elevated access, where we may trust those privileged users, but we still leave that access disabled a majority of the time. Really falls back on that least privilege access idea. The idea of session recording, credential vaulting, multi-person approvals. It's these access stipulations and workflows ensure access can be authorized and audited in a way that leave third-party access low. Risk governance and compliance. We see this through the introduction of role-based access control and contextual policies, where identity management enables policies to be assigned to roles which individual identities can be. We see periodic access reviews and certification, where access policies should be verified in real time. And we want to do this for certifying not only that our security is as expected, but we want to make sure that the user identity is available when needed. The idea of separation of duties and audit trail recognize opportunities for insider threats and limit access before it becomes an issue. And finally, analytics and intelligence, where identity-based logging and threat detection support users by monitoring their behavior. And it's this break away from predictable behavior that could yield some sort of breach, and we want to be aware of that. And that yields to the integration of orchestration and event monitoring solutions, where we are able to collect these metrics so events can help orchestrate these access entitlements and automation. Centralized conditional access is very important here, where conditional access help yield a low risk score. And this is really important as we keep our attack surface low, but we really want to keep these risk scores low such that we don't open ourselves up to breaches. Entitlement intelligence and role mining, where we analyze existing access patterns across users, departments, and applications. So here at ISSQUARED, we have a great product called ORSIS, where we deliver identity-driven security policies. We mentioned role-based access control with contextual enforcement, where we grant access based on these predefined roles and assigned roles. We have continuous reevaluation and posture checks, where policy events are always monitored for state changes. Automatic account deprovisioning on state change, where changes in authoritative systems can instantly trigger revocation of all access. And it's that instant revocation that is really important to our security posture. Now, we talk about the benefits of an ORSIS integration. We'll have lower operational cost and reduced errors. It's this idea that we want to get rid of the manual configurations, and building in automations can yield great productivity gains for the workforce. Stronger security posture with fewer gaps. We have less concern that something is being missed along the way through these automations. Better experience and less friction, less sludge, less delay between systems, and less chance for inconsistencies. We have easier compliance and audit preparation, so access centralized logging capabilities without having to monitor multiple locations, such that if we need to prove to ourselves or an external party that we have security in a certain way, we can very quickly provide that evidence. Now, we do see key integration challenges, being a trusted provider here in the market for a number of years, where legacy systems can often challenge the migration or pose a significant hurdle for these integrations. We have organizational silos and politics. The internal product ownership, a lot of times, if someone has built up a project, the idea of taking that away from them can feel very personal. So that ends up being a hurdle for us to overcome. The idea of data quality and identity hygiene, where the integration of still more systems can seem daunting and counterproductive, and we want to get over that. We can run in parallel, we can run as a replaced system, but we want to make this easier for the user. But we understand for them, at least in the short term, it is another application to manage and learn. We have the idea of change management and user adoption, where project management requires time and resources to execute. And we understand that. We've got a rich history of working with projects. And so as a trusted advisor, we're happy to come in and help you work through this. And we see this as a number of steps toward implementation where we introduce a phase of crawling where we might introduce the auditing of identity hygiene. As we get onto a walking phase, we may add provisional automation and workflows. And then if we're up and running, this might be full access automation, analytics, conditional access, all that automation that's going to be great for our workforce. And if we're looking for quick wins, which many of us are, you should really rely on us for this identity assessment and start that POC discussion. Put us to work for you, and we'll demonstrate what we can do to help your business. So just to recap, we should not continue to incorporate more siloed identity solutions into our environment. They're a great way to deliver key features to the integrated identity system, but an integrated solution should provide savings by way of cost, time, and manpower, which is going to be excellent for your business, your organization. And I-squared integration does not end with identity. That's been our focus today, but realistically, we offer great solutions in terms of certificate lifecycle management, hyperconverged infrastructure, compute fabric, and we are a proven service provider, a managed service provider delivering extensive support services with our innovative Connect portal, which our users are able to use as a self-service portal to monitor their solutions and request service if need be. So thanks so much for joining us today. This is the point where we would like to ask you if you have any questions. Bharath is on the line as well. But thank you so much for joining us on this identity conversation.
For more information, visit us at ISSQUAREDInc.com and ISSQUAREDInc.com insights, events, upcoming webinars.